Meg Whitman is the only reliable fiscal conservative in the race, and her commitment to cutting spending and eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse is the way to restore prosperity here in the Golden State. A quote from none other than Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association President Jon Coupal, who joins me now on the Capitol line. John, it's good to have you, my friend.
Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Real good. Huge news today, and this was unexpected on my behalf.
Well, you know, our PAC board does review all major candidates, and we've been looking at this race for a long time. Both Steve Poizner and Meg Whitman came down to L.A. to meet with our board of directors for lunch, and we went through a rigorous process. And we gave the edge to Meg, and we really think she deserves it for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, our bread and butter, Eric, as you know, is Proposition 13, and her answers, and both written and in conversation, on her commitment to defend and protect Proposition 13 were right where they needed to be. And secondly, the first time I met Meg, we talked about, I said, there's this thing that Arnold did, speaking of Arnold, called the California Performance Review that was a really good work product but was never implemented. And she said, yeah, I know, I've read it. And I said, you've read the whole thing? And I knew it was 3 volumes. And she says, I've read it twice. And so I asked her some very pointed questions about the content, and she had read it twice.
Wow.
So I do think we have someone who is not only best positioned to take on Jerry Brown, but also is there on the fiscal issues. And let me add quickly, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is focused on fiscal issues that she is going to be where we want her to be.
Once again, breaking news here in Sacramento. Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association endorsing Meg Whitman on the Republican side of the aisle to be the next governor of California. Let me ask you about your quote here, John, saying that Meg Whitman is the only reliable fiscal conservative in the race. Is that to say that Steve Poizner is not reliable or is not a fiscal conservative?
I think Steve has come a long way, and I have a lot of respect for Steve. But our first encounters with Steve were very negative when he was pushing for a reduction of the 2/3 vote for school bonds and for other taxes. He did that when he was in the high-tech industry and contributed significant amounts of money to that. Now, since then, he says it was in error. Look, we've all made mistakes, but that was, I think, as people know, our bread and butter issue in defense of the 2/3 vote, which is a part of Proposition 13. So I think that caused us some degree of concern. I do think he has done a lot in saying that was a mistake, but on some of the core issues, I think the feeling was we just had to go with someone who had not made those kinds of statements and supported those kinds of changes in policy.
And this once again refers to EdVoice, a board that he put together for education here in California, correct?
Yes, he was involved in EdVoice and also that organization, and he personally was out there stumping for reductions in the 2/3 vote.
When you met with Steve Poizner, was there still an inclination to tamper with Prop 13?
No, I think he has said that he learned his lesson and he wouldn't go down that road. And look, we'll take him at his word. But if you have someone who comes out of the box, never having gone down that path, and is really laser focused on the spending side and the inordinate political power of the public employee unions, I think we came up with the right result.
When we consider Meg Whitman as governor of California, has she actively and with passion signed a no new tax pledge?
I don't know whether she has signed the Grover Norquist pledge. She has signed our pledge to protect Proposition 13, which again is our bread and butter.
Okay, and John, once again, you're savvy in stuff like this. As a matter of fact, to folks listening, I turned to John in many of these situations to have him wax eloquent and me to sit upon the knee and glean a little bit. What is it about Meg that enamors you? Obviously, she read the material, she knows the material, you've endorsed her here, she's reliable on Prop 13. What else do you and the rest of the folks at Howard Jarvis like about her?
I think when you look at people and you try to envision what are they going to be like when they have a cabinet meeting, what are they going to be like when they negotiate with their adversaries. And I think we've seen someone who's come in and calls their adversaries girly men and is insulting. I just don't think you're going to see that from Meg Whitman. I think Meg Whitman will be very businesslike and say to her adversaries, I respect your position, but here is the state that California is in right now, and we need these reforms. Work with me to try to get these reforms. I don't think you're going to see someone who is going to berate or browbeat, but I do think somebody's going to come in a very businesslike manner, move their policy agenda forward, and will use the tools that the governor has to move that policy, those policies forward. One of the problems we've had with Arnold, among a few, is that
you guys just had one problem with him?
Yeah, we've had a few. Is when he has taken a stance on an issue, he doesn't start far out enough on our side, and he doesn't give himself any room to negotiate. I think you're going to see someone with Meg's business experience not make that kind of mistake.
Why now? Why this Monday, still in February, ahead of convention and without a debate in the can yet? Why now, John?
Why now? Very, very simply, and that was an item of discussion last week, and that is, quite simply, the massive independent expenditure coming from the unions. Right now, the unions have identified their target. Their target is Meg Whitman. And I think now is the time for everybody on our side of the aisle to do an honest assessment of the viability of the candidates and who is it that our adversaries are most scared of, and who right now is tied, the Rasmussen, with Jerry Brown at 43-43. And that's part of the driving force behind her decision.
Could I parse your statement by putting some words in your mouth, suggesting that you maybe believe, or folks, the committee believe, that Steve Poizner should get out of this race?
That is ultimately going to be up to him. I think at some point somebody needs to, read the writing on the walls. And look, I'm never going to tell anybody to get out of a race. I know that for our organization, we are deathly afraid of another Jerry Brown governorship, and we need to carefully consider what needs to be done on behalf of everybody from the business community to the Tea Partiers that Arnold so dismissively rejects, and say what is in the best interest of the state of California. And we know what the problems are. We have 12% of the population, 30% of the welfare load. Somebody needs to come in a very professional and business-like manner, who is detail-oriented, by the way, to be able to deal with these very challenging problems.
Once again, Jon Coupal, president of Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Big news today, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association endorsing Meg Whitman for governor here in California. John, before I let you go, let me play some fun Arnold stuff from his trip to D.C. Here he is talking about those Tea Party folks.
The Tea Party is not going to go anywhere. I think the Tea Party is all about just an expression of anger and dissatisfaction. At the same time, I think that there's a lot of people that are disenchanted and dissatisfied, and they're angry. And this is why you have the Tea Party and all of those things.
How do you take his comment here about the Tea Party, John?
Well, this is the same guy that thought Prop 1A was going to win, and it got crushed 2-1. So here in California, that a state, with all due respect to the governor, that he had a large part in helping to put on its current path of despair, that people sense there's a different way out of this, and it's a way that involves free enterprise, limited government, fewer regulations, a favorable tax environment, and someone who can advance that agenda.
John, I appreciate your time. Thank you, my friend.
All right, Eric, take care.